First, I'd like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the land, the Ngunnawal people. Always was and always will be Aboriginal land. My name is Michelle Myers. I'm the MC for this morning. I want to thank you all for turning out. We're back on the lawns again. Same story, unfortunately. This time we are with some very brave seafarers from the BHP ships, the Lowlands Brilliance and the Maralula. I'd like those seafarers to come forward now and come and join us up here, please. These gentlemen behind me were sacked at sea on the 10th of January in the middle of the ocean, away from their family, friends and union for support. The BHP and BlueScope ships that were carrying iron ore around our coast were the last two iron ore carrying vessels that had an Australian crew. They were sacked at sea by email and told that they no longer have a future at sea on BHP and BlueScope iron ore ships. This is the last two iron ore ships carrying our iron ore around our coast with Australian crewed seafarers. We've done this job for over 100 years. Australian seafarers, our proud seafaring nation, have been carrying our iron ore for over 100 years. So this morning we are joined by some special guests. We have Anthony Albanese, who would like to discuss the issue. Thank you, Anthony.
Well, thanks very much, Michelle, and I begin by acknowledging the traditional owners of the land on which we meet and pay my respect to their elders past and present. I acknowledge all my parliamentary colleagues who are here. We've got Tony Zappia from Adelaide, Sharon Clayton from Newcastle, Stephen Jones from Wollongong, who have all joined us here today to express solidarity with these fine workers behind us. Workers who are doing a job not just for themselves and their family, doing a job for their nation. How is it that our iron ore can be carried on a ship with a foreign flag, with foreign workers being paid foreign wage rates? This government has had a debate in the last 24 hours about our borders. They have opened up our borders. They have opened up our borders completely and put the white flag up when there should be an Australian flag on the back of Australian ships carrying Australian iron ore with Australian seafarers on it. And frankly, I am sick and tired of this government's rhetoric talking about national security when it doesn't understand the fact that there is a direct link between having an Australian shipping industry and our national security. We would not cop a Filipino registered truck driving with a Filipino registered licensed worker being paid Filipino wage rates on the Hume Highway between Sydney and Melbourne. The Blue Highway should be no different. The Blue Highway is a part of our territory, and it should have Australian sovereignty on it. And we don't argue to close the coast. What we argue, though, is that where there are Australian ships available and when there are Australian seafarers being trained, that it is in Australia's national interest, both in terms of security, in terms of environment, but also in terms of our national economic interest, that be done by an Australian ship. And for BHP, who I make no apologies for saying that the big Australian has shown it has a little heart and no soul, forget about their rhetoric, and this is nothing that I haven't said to them directly. The fact is that in the next few weeks, Toll will launch a couple of ships, one in Burnie and one in Melbourne, and I'll be there in Melbourne for the launch with the Australian flag on the back. So we're not anti-industry, far from it. We want Australian industry to prosper, but we want Australian industry to prosper in a way that benefits our Australian national economy, our Australian jobs, our Australian environment and our Australian national security. And we make no apologies for standing in solidarity with the MUA and with other unions and the communities who are involved in saying that it is outrageous that these men lost their jobs while they were on the high sea, that they didn't even have the guts once again, an Australian company, to actually front up and negotiate and actually participate in a way that just shows a little bit of common decency. So I stand with these workers. Labor stands with these workers. And when in government, we will do something to ensure that the Australian flag proudly flies on the back of Australian ships, that we employ Australian seafarers, that we don't do the sort of abuse that we've seen. It is an abuse of the legislation for a temporary licence to be granted for activities that is anything but temporary. I mean, iron ore isn't temporary. You don't sort of dig it up out of the ground just here or somewhere else. You don't know where the destinations are. It is permanent and therefore should not be eligible for a temporary licence between the Illawarra and Western Australia. So I say to you, it's been a busy day. We have a government collapsing behind us. They lost the first vote since the 1920s. And they start off with a lot more votes than I had when I was Leader of the House, and we didn't lose anything. But that's because they've lost their sense of purpose. They've lost their way, and nothing, I don't think, highlights that more than that incredible gap which is there between the rhetoric about borders and what happens on our waters and what is actually happening to Australians, Australian workers on their watch on our seas. And that's why I'm proud to be here. I congratulate and I pay my respect to the workers and their families and to all those who stand in solidarity with them. MUA, here to stay.